Yeah, the pain. Good morning and welcome to the MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board meeting for September 5th, 2024. Item 2, items for individual consideration. 2A, minutes were included in your packet. Hope you've had an opportunity to check those. Any corrections or changes? If not, I take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2B, the monthly financial report ending July 30th. Mr. Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in your packet your monthly financial report, as you said, for the period ending July 31st, 2024. On the revenue side for the month, $12,241,011 for a fiscal year of $12,241,011, and then for a total of $571,347,134. And I want to point out that we still remain 3% above collections. On expenditure side for the month, $11,614,248, fiscal year of $11,614,248, and total of $226,677,464. I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Mr. Todd? Okay, if not, I take a motion in a second to receive that report. Cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2C, recommend approval of resolution accepting $869 donation from the Oklahoma County Diversion Hub to the City Manager's Office for the MAPS Diversion Program for the construction contract and authorizing the City Treasurer to receive and deposit the funds.
So this is our award of contract, and very happy to be awarding this project and continuing our partnership with Oklahoma County Diversion Hub. The bids came in pretty good, but they came in over budget, and it doesn't specifically say on here, and I apologize if I meant for it to, is that we are asking for some contingency money to help award the base bid, and that contingency money will be in the amount of, I've got it here, I've got too many documents here. I believe it's $762,600. Fortunately, our contingency account had a healthy amount in there. That still leaves us with $1,133,400. This isn't something that we typically do, but we feel like with the current climate that we have with bids, and because we have that healthy contingency amount, that it's the right thing to do to get this awarded. And then also, in addition to that, the Oklahoma County Diversion Hub is providing $869,000 to help, or to award the alternates that were shown in the project. And those alternates include a different kind of metal panel, some AV equipment, some floor finish upgrades, some window shades, food service equipment, laundry equipment, and some electrical service upgrades. Again, it is a great partnership that we have with them, and I'm very anxious to get this project started, I think, as everybody else is here. Okay. And it comes with the recommendation from the subcommittee.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, excited to get this one moving forward. So take a motion in a second to approve. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2D, continuing on with the Diversion Hub, recommend approval of addendas number 1, 2, and 3 for the MAPS for the Diversion Hub, awarding contract, base bid plus alternates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to Win Construction for $15,655,000. No, $15,655,000, and approving contract and bonds. And I think this is kind of what you already kind of went through.
Right, it's what I just summarized. Within this memo, you can see the two base bids. We had $14,786,000, And then the other bidder was at $15,500,000. So you can see they're reasonably close. That's why we feel like it is a good opportunity to go ahead and award this.
Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, I take a motion in a second to approve. Cast your votes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, and finally, 2E, recommend approval of the First Amendment to Real Estate Donation Agreement with the Oklahoma County Diversion Hub for the MAPS4 Diversion Hub project.
Okay, this is an amendment to the agreement that we have with them, and the reason we're doing this is because the agreement says that years from now, if the city decides to get out and wants to get rid of the building, they have the opportunity to buy that, and the price would be reduced by how much they have donated in it, that being the land. And now we need to update this to recognize the $869,000 in actual construction materials that will be put into the building.
Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. And I just want to stop and say this has been less than simple. It's been a little bit complex, but thanks to the MAPS office and David for your focus on getting us to this point. So we're going to be doing a groundbreaking, assuming City Council agrees. Okay. Moving on to item 2F. Recommend approval of amendment number 1 to architectural services contract with SA Studio for the MAPS4 Mental Health Crisis Center for an increase of $124,400.
As we started the design on this project, we toured several of the crisis centers and realized that the project would really benefit if we could find somebody who is explicitly involved in crisis centers, that's all they do, to be as a consultant with this architect. And that's very common with the wellness centers. We had geriatric type consultants that helped us design those, and we felt like this is a good opportunity and a good place for a design specific consultant to help with this project.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. If not, I take a motion in a second to approve. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2G, presentation on site selection for the MAPS4 Restoration Center.
So this will be a two-part presentation. AJ Kirkpatrick from ADG will start us off, and then Dan Hayes from HMM will back cleanup, so to speak.
Just hope I can get on base. Well, I haven't, there's some new faces, but we have presented in the past. I specifically have presented on some of the mental health projects in the past. So we wanted to give you guys an update on some of the conversations we've been having specific to a proposed site for the Restoration Center. Mouse, okay. So we haven't talked about the Restoration Center in a while, so we wanted to give you just a brief overview of why we're talking about the concept of crisis stabilization, why this is important overall to the community. First, it reduces criminalization of mental illness. It's viewed as an alternative, sometimes the word is used as diversion from jail or hospital emergency room. So we're helping reduce overcrowding at the county jail, and then also it is often cheaper than emergency room visits. So we're giving our first responders in particular another option of where to take people that are dealing with these sort of issues. And then they also will benefit, the consumers will benefit from the presence of trained mental health experts, which will help with things like screening, assessment, counseling, and especially in prescribing and monitoring their use of medication. So it's very easy to slip into talking about there's two wings at OKIC, and as a reminder, OKIC, which is at the General Pershing campus for North Care, is viewed as the model that we were supposed to be following And so it actually has two wings, and so it's often easy to fall into are we talking about the chair wing or the bed wing? And so I wanted to just briefly introduce those two concepts. Everyone enters the OKIC through the Urgent Recovery Center, the URC, which is the chairs. And so the folks that run that will be careful to even say it's not 24 hours, it's 23 hours and 59 minutes is what you're supposed to be there for, and you're being assessed. And generally, you're having medication introduced into your system. And so the staff is, at that point, really trying to triage and understand what that person is dealing with, because it's very difficult in those first 24 hours to understand what all they may be coming with. Then they will transfer to crisis stabilization unit, and that is a bed setting. At OKIC, there's separate rooms with beds, whereas the chairs are in a common room. That is anywhere from 3 to 5, sometimes up to 7 days typically, that you'll be in that crisis stabilization unit. And I didn't mention to the subcommittee, but then one of the other MAPS projects we'll eventually start talking to you about is the housing piece. And the housing piece is really supposed to be even the next step after this, where you can transition, hopefully, into some short-term housing. So David wanted us to give you just a brief outline of what we've been doing over the past few months. You may remember when this was introduced to the MAPS 4, or to the City Council as one of the MAPS 4 projects, that a project in San Antonio, the Bexar County Restoration Center, was referenced heavily. So in that mid-2022 period, we met with a gentleman named Leon Evans, who was one of the original people to come up with that concept. He came up here, and we had several meetings with people in mental health, law enforcement, some representatives from the CJAC that I'll mention later, the Criminal Justice Advisory Council, I think. And that was where we really started to get our arms around what all the pieces needed to be for the Restoration Center. We interviewed operators then in August of that year. You may remember in early 23, there was a lot of discussions in our community, one about where the jail was going to end up, and also there was starting to be, word was starting to hit the street that the Griffin Memorial Hospital in Norman was going to close down, and there was a pretty good chance it was coming to Oklahoma City. So we did slow down just a bit to see if we were going to figure out where those landed, in case we needed to be co-located with those. But in the summer of 2023, we picked up ADG, the company that I work for. Since we do have a design wing, we went ahead and started doing some pre-programming activities with the operators, knowing that we still needed to hire the official architects for the projects. We wanted to at least start the conversation and put into motion some of the things that we were learning to start actually coming up with a very basic spreadsheet of spaces, not even really a floor plan, but just kind of these are the spaces that we think we're going to need. And then that was going to be able to help the architecture team get started quicker. So the Donahue was finally announced in September of that year. We did architect interviews in October, selected AHMM as part of that, who's going to be finishing up this presentation. And then we officially signed the MOU with our operator, NorthCare, who's also back here in the room. And that was in December at the end of 2023. We did our design kickoff in February of this year, and then in May, June, we toured several Pierce facilities. We took both the team for this and the Crisis Center over to Tulsa and had them look at some Pierce facilities. And then we also started looking at some sites, and that became a key turning point in this process. So that's just a short list of all the people that we talked to across the operators, law enforcement, criminal justice, that's the Criminal Justice Advisory Council I was talking about, CJAC, Leon Evans, and then the last one I'll mention is Healthy Minds, is a group that's been working with the city on the overall crisis response. And so they gave us some really helpful information. They gave us a white paper on what we should be considering in locating these sort of facilities. And you're going to see some of the takeaways from that white paper and what I'm going to walk you through here. So important thing is that things have changed a lot since MAPS was originally passed. The world has continued to spin underneath us here, and we're trying to stay with that. When it was passed in 2019, there was one was OKIC, which I mentioned on the General Pershing campus in NorthCare, and then there was OCREW, which was actually our first crisis unit in our community. It is very much, if you've never been to OCREW, it is very much a retrofit. It was put into an old administrative building that was additional space that Department of Mental Health had. So it is not really the ideal situation. And what we found out shortly after starting to get engaged on this is that the Department of Mental Health long-term wanted to close OCREW down. And in what we've heard even more recently in the past month or so is that things are starting to fail in that building to the level that they actually are going to want to shut that down even probably faster than initially described. So that map, 1 and 2, becomes 1. And then what's happened, though, is that we're seeing the growth of community-based behavioral health organizations that are opening their own facilities, especially those URCs, those chair-based facilities. And so I've got up to number 11. There's some even far outside of this. I think Red Rock was in Chickasha, but definitely Red Rock, North Care have been opening several facilities all the way from Guthrie down to Norman. There's another one that's been announced in Moore, number 11. So these are other options for either the consumers or first responders potentially to go. And we wanted to be mindful of those in terms of some of the location decisions that we felt like we needed to make. So this is zoomed in on those exact same dots, just trying to clear out some of the suburbs so we can focus on our city limits here. So you've got Oak-Kick there in purple, and we're going to do this a little backwards. We were already doing some of this site analysis and starting to look at some sites when in early 2024, we were approached by Northcare, our provider, who had been working with, who had been in conversations with the Arnall Family Foundation about a potential site. And so we went and toured that, and we ended up thinking it was such a positive site, and it met so many of the criteria that we wanted to go ahead and have AHMM do a fit test, which is what they're going to talk to you about here in a second. So I'm going to show you the data I was going to show you before we knew a site to show you where we were looking because we think this site works so well in terms of those factors. So our site there is red. And you may be familiar with the Diversion Hub site, which is in blue. They have brought to us the potential to use the yellow site there, proposed project site, and then also there's a small purple triangle that the City of Oklahoma City owns, that could also potentially be brought into this site, which AHMM will talk to you about. This is a quick snapshot of where folks are coming to Oak-Kick from 2022-23. The important thing, outside of that green, the big green portion, which is those that are coming on their own recognizance or with family, is that the orange and the blue, orange law enforcement, blue being hospitals, those are our main referral sources. And both years, that equals at least 60% are coming from those two places. So in looking at your site selection, I would encourage you to look at this from 3 different perspectives. 1 is resident need. 2 is accessibility for first responders, and 3 are links to our existing healthcare system. I'm going to walk you through those as quick as I can here. Often when you look at our city, you kind of think about our entire boundaries, but I wanted you to look at this because this is really housing density. This is how we actually use our community in terms of where our population is concentrated, and our proposed site would be right here. Also, we were able to get with the Oklahoma City County Health Department, and they shared 3 key data points that then add up into an index map, which is where you add all 3 together. I'm going to walk you through each of those 3 data points. The first being mental health visits. The darker the purple, we're getting higher per capita mental health visits in those zip codes. And our site is right there. This is suicide rates by zip code. And suicide is a lower occurring phenomenon, so you're not going to have data in all the zip codes, but our site is right here. And then this is drug overdose deaths, and again, higher the purple, the more drug overdose, and so our site is right here. So this is the index map of all 3 added together, and our site would be right there. The key thing I'll drive home to you, in addition to the really dark ones, is just notice the next level of purple, that entire circle around the core of our city. Second point I want to talk to you about was first responders. We want to make this convenient as possible to our first responders. They are very time crunched. That is very clear when you talk to them, and so we want to get something that's as convenient to all officers of our community, and that is more convenient, almost like we've made the joke that we almost want to make this on the way to the jail or the hospital, so that it's almost impossible for them to drive by and not use it as the best option. So this is all 12 subdivisions. I had a chance in November to do a ride-along with someone in Hefner 1 up in the northwest corner. The key takeaway I'll say from that and talking to that officer is there's only a certain number of maybe 12 officers that are out on any particular beat in Hefner 1 at 3 different shifts across the time. If they have somebody that's having a mental crisis, they're leaving Hefner 1 to take them somewhere. And that means that there is one less officer that's up there. And they feel a very strong commitment to get back to their fellow officers in case they're needed. So we want to make that a very quick trip for them. And so we feel like that is, the main takeaway from that is that we need to keep these things centralized, because you can play a game where I start to move that dot any direction and it starts to become harder for those in the other corners to get to. Last point is the healthcare system. Again, you want to make sure that there's a little bit of a back and forth. I was just debating this with Randy. It's actually more that they're coming to OKIC, and often OKIC is needing to refer them to a hospital, but in some cases, after they've been treated, they are coming back. So we want to keep them close to major health centers. And so we asked their operators, okay, what would even be on this map if we tried to map this? Those numbers in the stars represent what we believe would be the priority hospital centers based on that feedback. And Saints is number 1 because it is our downtown hospital. It has really evolved to become the hospital that is dealing with most mental illness in our community. It has one of the largest ERs in the country now, and it has a lot of specific services for those with mental illness. So if we're going to try to prioritize these, our operator is saying you really want to try to be as close to Saints as possible. This is an exercise I was trying to help you visualize across those 4 health centers. That's a 10-minute drive time. So before we knew this site, I was trying to stay near those hospitals, and you come up with this general yellow boundary, which coincidentally generally follows the outline of our interstate system. So basically, we were trying to stay in the inner loop, is the takeaway. So the site that we've proposed is 3 minutes from Saints, 8 minutes from OU, 10 minutes from Integris Southwest, and 11 minutes from Integris Baptist. So with that, I'm going to invite Dan Hayes from AHMM to come up and tell you more about how this site could potentially work.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me today to talk about this site study that we've done for the site that AJ's just introduced to you there. This is the site that we're talking about today, and we've done a few fit tests that I will talk to you in a bit more detail about. And across here to the left of the page are all the different headings and analysis that we've completed. So that what you're seeing today is a very small extract from a much larger document that we've completed that looks at all these different points and topics. The first thing we wanted to look at was the history of the site, and to try and understand why it was this slightly odd shape, this wedge shape. As you can see, it wasn't always like that. It was a typical sort of grid system, which the rest of the city follows. But over in the 1960s, with the IM pay plan to demolish most of downtown for redevelopment, up in the top corner here shows the location of the site, and there was a key idea about connecting in 5th Street. And they created Linwood Avenue. Obviously, most of the other demolition wasn't completed, but this section was. So that was the area that was demolished, and that's why the site forms this slightly different wedge-shaped plot of land that we're looking at today. So we took the information that was provided to us by ADG, the initial programming information, and we worked with Northcare to refine that a little bit further, and we've come up with some areas for the 2 different buildings. The first is the Restoration Centre, and that comes out to about 43,000 square foot. The second element of this is the transitional housing. We haven't been officially appointed to move forward with the transitional housing as yet, because there isn't an operator in place. But as part of this test fit study, we thought it was prudent to look at the transitional housing and make sure that that could also fit on this site if it were to be co-located. And that came out to be just over 18,000 square feet. This is quite a complex diagram, but it's something that we use internally to start to try and understand how this building could potentially be laid out, how users and visitors of the building would use it, and how the different spaces interact with each other. So if you imagine that the dotted vertical line that runs down there is a security line, and then the dotted horizontal line is a division of first and second floor. This isn't necessarily a building plan, this is just a diagram to start to understand how these spaces work together. People, members of the public, if you were self-admitting or if you're a member of staff, you would come into a lobby area and into a reception, and you immediately pass the secure line. A separate entry is required for first responders, and that needs to be visually separate from the main entry for other visitors to the building, because first responders can often be a trigger for other users. You come through, the first responders have their own sort of Sallyport secure entry. There is then a handover area, and then once clients are assessed, they're then taken to the URC, so that's the chairs that AJ was talking about, or into a medical withdrawal. From the URC, where you're there for 24 hours, you move through to the crisis stabilization unit, where you're up there for a maximum of 7 days. These areas are sort of pinwheel round medical services of nurses' stations and offices and things like that. Another entry is required, sort of maintenance, deliveries, back of house, and servicing, and that comes into a separate area that needs to be completely separated from the other uses of the building. Then on the going up to the second floor, another key component of this building is the outpatient services. So if you've been through the system and you're on your road to recovery, you come back to this building for ongoing treatment, counselling, and to meet with other partners within the city. Again, that needs a separate entry from people who are potentially in crisis. If you're in recovery, you don't really want to mix with people who are having a really bad day. So the idea is you come through. There's potentially an idea of a coffee shop as well that could be entered directly by the public, and that's connected to this lobby area. And then you move upstairs to the outpatient services that are located here, and also some administration, so partnering services within the city as well. What these red arrows that you see here are us trying to connect sort of staff circulation routes and making sure that they don't interact with potentially client moving through the building. So this is an image of the existing site as it stands right now. Linwood Diagonal runs across here, 6th Street is to the north, Western Avenue is to the east, and this is the existing building that's currently located on that site with a parking lot to the front and to the rear. If we were to just put the parking that's required for the restoration centre on the site, that equates to about 96 spaces that you can see here. That parking count we believe is quite high, but we're designing for the worst case scenario, and that complies with code for the size of the building that I just mentioned earlier. And this is how the first floor of this could sort of lay out. This isn't necessarily a complete design for a building. This is just us taking the information that we have and starting to lay out those spaces, bearing in mind some of the things I was talking about earlier with regards to drop-off of first responders, drop-off the back of house, and then a main entry directly from the parking lot. So this diagram suggests that you potentially come through. The entrance could be from the parking lot into these shared spaces, and then taken directly to the URC, which is could be located around a courtyard to bring natural light deep into the plan and have a connection to nature, which we know helps with healing and recovery. And then the crisis stabilization unit, in a similar idea, is located around a courtyard to bring that natural light into those individual rooms, with medical withdrawal located here conveniently on the circulation spine as well. To the north, to the west of the site, this is where we are proposing the transitional housing could be located on the other side of the parking lot. That would have its own 10 parking spaces that would be dedicated to that facility. You may have noticed that there was a road, Klein Avenue, that linked across the site in this location and sort of isolated a small triangular portion of the site. In this proposal, we are relocating the traffic to make 6th Street two-way all the way along. Currently it's a one-way system at the end here, which allows us to close Klein and bring in a big chunk of the site back into play. So that's how that could be located. Obviously, this is just a sort of test fit site analysis. There's a lot more work to come to really refine the plan and turn it into a real proposal. But We're confident from doing this that this site is an adequate size for us to be able to accommodate everything that's required. As you move up to the second floor, this would be where the outpatient services would be located, and then administration, and a second floor for the transitional housing and common spaces as well. Just quickly talking about timeline, as AJ mentioned, we were appointed at the end of May, or given the notice to proceed at the end of May, looking at the programming. We worked on that for a few weeks, but then we didn't have a site to look at. So this dashed line that you see here is where we were unable to really work on the project, and we downed tools for a while. Then we picked that up in the early August again, and we've completed these test fits that I've shown you today. And hopefully, if we all agree that this is a good location for this, we'll move forward and turn this into a real proposal and complete task one that we're due to completed just before the holidays, so in December. And then there's a review period, and then we'll move forward with task 2. And that was it.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
very much.
So one last thing I didn't really touch on is, this has been introduced to us as a potential donation to the project. Right now, we have $1.1 million for land acquisition. We had started to look at other sites before this was brought to our attention, but we felt like this was just such an amazing opportunity because it checked so many of the boxes, and we have the potential to save that 1.1 and put that back into our overall construction budget, which would raise it from about 17.4 to 18.5. That we wanted to go ahead and have HM do this work to exhaust this as a potential site before we looked at anything else. So.
Thank you, AJ. Any questions? Yes, Joy.
Oh, I just hold it. Okay, sorry, still new. Anyway, you had mentioned the Healthy Minds Initiative white paper. Is that something that you have shared with the projects? So you said it kind of goes into what all is.
Have we shared it with the individual architects, you saying?
I'm talking about like with the MAPS Advisory Council.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's something that you have or you can share with us?
Yeah, we can share.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Yes, Chelsea.
Mine is more commentary. We got to see this plan earlier this week in the community subcommittee meeting, and some of, the discussion kind of revolved around the idea that land costs are really high, and some of these things that are making these projects that are really beneficial to, the overall health of the community more difficult. So in general, I'd just like to say thank you to the Arnall Foundation for considering this, to you guys for, working this plan up and really doing the due diligence to see if this site works, because it does seem like it's really quite a gift and can do a lot of good for the diversion hub, the entire area around, and then our community at large. So thank you for this work.
Yeah, great.
I should mention that there are some advantages to the diversion hub too. They like the fact that our facility would be 24/7, whereas the diversion hub won't be. And there's just some potential synergies between the two being co-located that we're hearing positive things about.
Yes. Chelsea, thank you for your comments. Couldn't agree more. Arnall has been a great partner in moving some of these projects forward. Any other questions or comments? And we don't need to vote on this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to item 2H. Recommend approval of the MAPS 4 sidewalks and related amenities, Phase 2A. I'm not going to list all of that.
Right, this is our next sidewalk project. Brett Cavness and his entourage are here from Garver to go over this project.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, everybody, thank you. Here to talk about the preliminary engineering report for the sidewalks and related amenities to Phase 2A of the MAPS 4 project. There we go, just a little quick brief overview for you all. This is really the first phase of Part 2 of the Bike Walk Oklahoma City master plan for the sidewalks. It's been broken into 2 phases, primarily budgetary reasonings for that to make the bike a little bit easier for the construction community. This Phase 2A will focus on 3 project areas in northwest Oklahoma City. The project goals is to create a more walkable community, connect people to places such as schools, bus bus stops, and also parks, but also to improve pedestrian safety in and around our city. Budget for this phase is a little more than $3.7 million, and we anticipate starting project in construction in 2025. First area that we'll look at is along Lyrewood Lane, bounded by Wilshire Boulevard and Northwest 63rd Street, east of Rockwell. This is an area that is highlighted with a lot of multimodal, multifamily facilities in that area, residential neighborhoods, but also Two Lakes Elementary School, along with 6 Embark bus routes that are currently, or bus stops that are currently in this location that do not have sidewalks that connect those. The next location is kind of in the Northwest 63rd area in May Avenue. You see on the screen here, bounded by Northwest Expressway on the south and 63rd on the north, and the east half or east side of May Avenue. Again, trying to connect people in places with residential areas. This is kind of in the Belle Isle area, so you'll see that the Belle Isle Park, Belle Isle School, Middle School, and then Belle Isle Library are in this general vicinity, but it also has a good connection to commercial areas along 63rd and along May Avenue. And then the last area is along Northwest Expressway, and the connection here is to an existing trail that does cross Northwest Expressway at a signalized location for protection of pedestrians to the bus rapid transit area that's located on the northeast corner of Meridian and Northwest Expressway. So with that, some more in-depth, I will let Daniel Jordan speak here.
Thank you, Brett. So this is just a real high-level view of some of the design challenges that we saw when we were doing our field reconnaissance and getting the general feel for the area. So starting off, this is on Lyrewood Lane. It's approximately halfway between Wilshire and 63rd. This is a drainage structure that goes underneath the road. It's a at-grade structure, and you can see that there's a exposed rebar in this photo here on that structure, and so it's non-compliant in just a surface standpoint for accessibility. Also, it drops down from the road surface area in general, and so there's just no connectivity and ADA compliance. John's going to touch a little bit more about how we're going to address this one, but this was one of the more challenging aspects along Lyrewood Lane that we saw on that section. Moving over into the Villa and 62nd Street area, we have quite a bit of a grade impact with that senior living condo style there, and their private staircases that connect them down to their on-street parking, as well as several utility relocations. So just topography and utilities that we're going to see have an impact on our timeline moving with that section there, and also the cost of the retaining wall. And then some additional connection points along 62nd going into May, just with grade, and also where we're putting people at the end of that corridor there. And then moving over into Northwest Expressway, a couple of drainage areas. This top right one is located near the First Nazarene Church, First Church of the Nazarene. Thankfully on this one we don't foresee the need for a box extension. However, it is quite a drop down onto the other side of that, so for safety reasons, we'll want to probably look at the addition of handrails and things like that, as well as down here on this other extension, which is a little bit further to the southeast of that, kind of near the Academy and Northwest Office Center. We just have a confluence of different drainage paths there, so we have kind of a combination of utilities, drainage, and then width between the roadway that are just going to create some challenges as far as grading and getting our sidewalks through there. And with those kind of highlighted, I'll turn it over to John to go over our project recommendations here.
Thanks, Daniel. So now that we've highlighted the 3 project areas, identified the Bike Walk OKC plan, we're going to kind of walk you through some of our project recommendations. So starting with May Avenue and Northwest 63rd Street, which is what we're calling the east area, the Bike Walk OKC plan identified 6 different residential streets, as you'll see in the map on the right, to provide connectivity to and from May Avenue, Northwest 63rd Street, and Northwest Expressway. And as you can see in the map on the right with the red lines, we are proposing a sidewalk along one side of each of those streets to meet the intent of the Bike Walk OKC plan. This is primarily neighborhoods, so these are going to be your typical residential streets. So because of that, we're proposing a 5-foot wide sidewalk at the back of curb, as you'll see in the typical section below. And then specific to this area, we've added an additional stretch of sidewalk along Rouse Avenue in that top left corner from 62nd Street to 59th Street, which is about 3 blocks. The reason for this is the intersection of May Avenue and 62nd doesn't have any existing access for pedestrians to cross May Avenue. However, 59th Street is an existing signal with ADA compliant curb ramps, crosswalks, push buttons, things like that. So we wanted to provide more of a direct connect from 62nd to 59th. And then looking at the next area, it's Northwest Expressway, which is what we're calling the central area. The Bike Walk OKC plan identified sidewalk along the south side of Northwest Expressway from Meridian Avenue to 63rd Street. And as you'll see in the red here as well, we are proposing sidewalk along those entire extents. This is primarily a commercial area. This is also a main arterial, Northwest Expressway, which means you got higher traffic volume, higher traffic count. So because of that, we're treating this as a commercial area, and we're proposing a 6-foot wide sidewalk, as you can see in the typical section here. However, we are also proposing a separation between the back of curb and the sidewalk, just to enhance pedestrian safety that much more because of the higher traffic speeds. And then looking to the last area, Lyrewood Lane, which is the west area, the Bike Walk plan identified sidewalk on the east side here from Wilshire to 63rd Street, and we are meeting the intent here as well, as you see in the red. This is kind of a mixed use of residential and commercial with some residential complexes, but also some commercial properties. So we're treating this as more commercial, also because there's an Embark bus stop route along Lyrewood Lane. And as Brett mentioned, there's 6 existing bus stops on the east side alone within these extents. So we wanted to treat this as commercial, and so we're proposing a 6-foot wide sidewalk at the back of curb, as you'll see in the typical section below. And then one of the major design challenges, as Daniel mentioned, is that drainage structure, existing drainage structure under the road. It's got the exposed rebar on the top of the surface, which makes the walking surface not ADA compliant. And it's also not wide enough to fit a 6-foot wide pedestrian path across the top of the box. So we've provided a little illustration here just to kind of show how we would improve that box and how we would accommodate that 6-foot wide sidewalk. So essentially, we would just remove the deteriorated section of the box and extend it out with some new concrete steel, wide enough to where we could fit that 6-foot wide sidewalk across and also fix the ADA service issues. So now to talk about construction costs. As you can see here, we provided a cost for each of the 3 areas and then provided a summation of those. So the estimated construction total for Phase 2A is approximately $3.58 million. And you can see the Phase 2A construction budget is $3.78 million. So that puts our project recommendations we've presented today under the budget by about $200,000. With that, I'll turn it back over to Brett.
Thank you, John. I'm much more of a visual person, but you do see the schedule here. So we're looking for approval of the preliminary engineering report, and then we will continue on into the 60% plan stage. Any right-of-way acquisition will be done later after those plans have been approved. That'd be early in next year. And then completion with the construction plans towards the end of January. And then we would submit for approval to bid and advertise in March. And hopefully have a final presentation to you all in April of next year. And then construction start sometime in the summer. And again, being a very visual person, this is where I like to see things done. It's a little easier for me. We do have a pretty long construction duration period. That was probably a little bit conservative, particularly whenever we go through neighborhoods. It takes a little bit longer coordinating with the residents when we have to tear out driveways and replace them, coordinate with their schedule through there. So we did add a little bit more time through there for some of those areas that are in the residential areas. Again, Northwest Expressway, very high volume, high speed traffic. That may take a little bit longer as well, so construction crews can do their work safely. And with that, be happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments? Yes.
So how much would residents and businesses be displaced with this construction?
They will not be displaced, but they will be inconvenienced, let's say. And again, we put into construction documents that the contractor has to coordinate with businesses on deliveries and when their peak time of business happens. And so there will be some coordination effort between field services, the contractor, and the business owners, likewise property owners. We will try to coordinate all of those things so they have in advance notice of when those contractors are going to be doing work in their specific area.
I have a
Yes,
follow-up question. In that process, if there are, I know you mentioned there were areas where the existing sidewalk or whatever wasn't quite big enough. So will there be any ownership exchange for residents that, I don't know, I don't really know how this part works. Like I know that residents are responsible up until the curb. So how does that work? In
So
ownership?
the proposed sidewalks and sidewalks all are going to be within the limits of the public right-of-way. And so construction will be done by them. Now, as far as the maintenance after that, I would probably lean on the city staff to answer that question much more than I could answer that question. But the construction will be done within the limits of the public right-of-way.
Yeah, it is property owner's responsibility.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I have to say, so I live in the Belle Isle neighborhood, and I am frankly very excited about this plan. So we are lots of walkers in our neighborhood, and so both from a pedestrian and a driver perspective, not dodging people, I think it'll be great. So I'm really excited. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much for your presentation today. Okay, so we do need to to approve this, so we need a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes. Okay, moving on to item 2I, recommend approval of master plan for the MAPS 4 beautification.
Last month, we gave you a preview on the beautification master plan, and this month, we bring the final version to you. Paul Reichbost and the Guernsey team are here to go through that master plan. We do have some sheets that'll be handed out, some edited sheets. So if you do choose to move to approve this, let's make sure everybody understands it's with the edited
revised.
sheets, and
Okay.
Paul will explain that.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having us back again. We are here for, approval of the beautification master plan before we move to the first phase of design. So my name is Paul Reichbost with Guernsey, Daniel Spurley with Guernsey as well, the rest of our design team. The project identifies $27.9 million for beautification efforts in major corridors in Oklahoma City. There's another $5 million for beautification in the operation fund for planning to manage and others to manage the actual implementation and ongoing maintenance of the beautification projects. The City Council MAPS 4 resolution identified multiple project potential locations that we have integrated into the plan. So this is the list from the original resolution. After kickoff, we had a lengthy engagement focus group study kind of process where we met with stakeholders and the public to get their input on beautification ideas, approaches, what they wanted to see. The stakeholders were incredibly important because many of them are going to be who are leaned on for actual maintenance and management of the beautification assets once they're all designed, planted, installed, painted, whatever element is chosen for each spot. One of the biggest things we wanted to focus on, though, was bang for your buck, of spreading the wealth for all the projects, because it's a lot of locations and a little bit goes a long way in some of these spots. We created what was called a vision strategy after the public engagement, and we want to, each one of these projects we evaluated through the lens of creating people-centered places and then beautifying connections between those places. And then with that, we came up with 5 different beautification principles that are applied to each project. Some projects hit all 5, some only hit a few, but we tried to get as much as we could at each location. So the first principle is people, the second is promotion, the third is purpose, the fourth is a sustainable project, and then the fifth is connection. So with that, I'm going to let Daniel go through each one of the proposed projects. Like I said, this is the original resolution. There's been a little bit of variation in some dividing, especially of number 11, the Portland to Classen. There is a corridor-related project on that one, and then 2 sub-projects underneath the corridor. There were no other locations added to this plan, and there was one related project that was on the original map that's not on this because it will be covered by an ODOT project. So we'll remove that one from the map. So Daniel, I'll let you take over.
Great, thank you, Paul. So I'll go ahead and address the changes on the pages just so we can get that out of the way because it is related to this budget table here. So a lot of what we have tried to do is evaluate what was possible at each of these locations. And then again, as Paul said, try to determine what the most people-centered approach and then approach to beautifying these connections. So really looking at that, and then those beautification principles are actually broken down even further into physical elements and things that we really attribute to how that principle would be achieved. And that's really what we use to kind of create recipes for each of these project locations. But the confusion on the pages is really just with the estimated timeline on those 6 pages had not been adjusted to the new phasing, which is represented on this table. So the current phasing is going to be what is on this table here and not necessarily what is listed on those 6 pages. But we have gone ahead and adjusted that in the actual document. So we'll go ahead and move forward and start looking at the projects. So in phase 2, we're currently in phase 1, the development of the master plan. So moving into phase 2, we have several projects that would be coming up, and really we moved forward on the timeline because of some things that are going to be happening in the city. Route 66 Centennial is coming up, and we really thought that would be a great opportunity to enhance these gateways. So we have 2 segments here. So this is one project, really 2 separate projects, but within that table, we've tried to group things together based on what would be achievable in terms of implementation. So then here, really those 2 segments over there by Lake Overholser, we have a really great landmark in the Lake Overholser Bridge. We assume that's going to be a really popular destination for those that are traveling during that centennial time. So we really like to see this enhanced with creative signage, lighting, really looking at opportunities for visitors, and also looking at this as a kind of creative gateway into the city as well. So also in that first phase, if you will, so phase 2, the first phase of design, we have the Bessie Coleman and then the airport approaches. So for that first airport approach, we're actually recommending the addition of the Bessie Coleman Garden next to the 99 Women's Pilots Museum. And so we have about $1.5 million to spread across these 3 projects. So 3 projects, 3 airport approaches, and in that first approach would include that Bessie Coleman Garden. And a lot of what you'll see here on the bottom of these projects are those elements that we discussed last time. So trees, public art, creative signage, each of those really attributed to the 5 vision principles that we are operating on. And then we have the I-44 airport approach as well. And then here we'll have the State Highway 152 airport approach also. So 1.5 million to really scatter throughout 3 projects, but we don't want to limit what that looks like in this first phase. So we've created a recipe of those elements, and then moving forward, we're going to work with the designers and evaluate them based on their ability to achieve those principles. And we've developed a matrix to really help the MAPS program and ourselves manage expectations on meeting those. Another really exciting one, so for the Olympics, and then also just a great connection between the First Americans Museum as well as Bricktown, but looking at improvements here just to increase the ability for pedestrian mobility between those 2 destinations. Currently, it's going to be a really uncomfortable travel, but we do know that parking is going to be at a premium during some of these events, but we also want to provide an enhanced pedestrian experience for residents in this area as well, and connecting those 2 different landmarks. And so then moving into phase 3, we have 3 pedestrian bridges. So this is considered one project, but again, with 3 separate projects under it. So we have $2 million that are going to be spread across these 3 pedestrian bridges, and looking at enhancements really on the inside of those bridges, but then on the outside. So we will be limited on what is structurally possible, but we've had a lot of conversations with ODOT and really making sure that we're going to enhance the visual appeal of this, but also make sure that it's feasible and safe for the users. So we have the pedestrian bridge number 1 here. So this is the first one right over here by Rockwood Elementary School. And so then pedestrian bridge number 2. I'm sure a lot of us have passed under these and, probably wished that they looked a little bit more appealing. But the thing that I really want to emphasize here is that they get used, and I think they're currently a harsh environment for the users, and I think softening these elements will be beneficial for the pedestrians as well as the motorists that get to pass through them. Also, again, acting as a gateway and enhancing that first impression for visitors. And then the third one here. So I'm going to kind of jump through some of these so you'll enhance some of the discussion around the specific locations. But city entrances. So we just discussed kind of a Route 66 themed gateway. These are really looking at those kind of strict boundaries of the city along the interstates. So here we really want to look at kind of a low-cost solution, maybe 3 different types of signage opportunities that could be used throughout these different entry points, but that are all unified kind of visually, and then maybe are surrounded by different treatments of native landscaping that's going to be really low maintenance moving forward. But again, it's like calling out that you've entered into Oklahoma City and making sure that we're giving off the best impression possible. So then we have the Northeast 23rd Street and Ralph Ellison statue, so this is really looking at this entire intersection. There was some funds in this first phase put aside towards the acquisition of the land here. But in working with the residents, there was a desire to have there be more of a plaza and something that kind of enhances the statue itself. So we wanted to create more of a gathering space with seating, some plantings. So not just a statue, but ends up being a space where people can gather. And so with that, we wanted to also build in some flexibility in where the exact location of this might end up, because there's a redevelopment plan for the corner there. So it's possible that this could end up being located closer to the library, but again, we've pushed this into a later phase, knowing that some of these details are going to have to be worked out, but buying ourselves time for that to happen before we enter into a design phase for that. And then we have the Clara Looper Corridor. So we have kind of two different segments here. So one project, a little over $2 million, but two different opportunities to enhance the gateways. There are some monuments there currently and some beautification surrounding them, but we really want to draw more attention to this unique asset and fixture within the community. And then obviously this is connected to the state capitol as well. So we think this is a great opportunity to enhance the safety and connectivity of this corridor, but also enhance what we're showing the people that are visiting the capitol as well. And then going into phase 5, we have the I-40 and Council Road, another opportunity to create a gateway, a lot of high traffic, and also a lot of visitors that come from surrounding areas to this intersection. And then we have the I-44 and Portland to Classen kind of segment. So you'll see this diagram doesn't cover the full section, but we've kind of highlighted one area of it to let you, or I'm sure many of you are familiar with this state, for physical state currently of this. Very highly trafficked, probably one of the most highly trafficked in our city. And we also have two different sub-projects for this as well. So looking at softening the physical infrastructure on the top. So we want to look at creative lighting opportunities, maybe replacing the fencing that's lining the top of some of this area, but then also maybe painting some of those concrete barriers as well. And then the two different sub-projects are actually the underpasses here at Youngs Boulevard and then also Pennsylvania Avenue. So again, trying to increase the safety here, soften the area by adding some lighting and really make people feel safer when they're passing through these. And then we have the Oklahoma City University 23rd Street corridor. This is one that there is some beautification right there in front of the university, but there's also some bus stops and things like that that don't have a lot of separation from oncoming traffic. And so we want to really look at how can you kind of enhance the feeling of safety for our transit users there, but also creating kind of a gateway and a welcoming atmosphere for this university corridor. And then we have Interstate 240, I-44 to I-35. We have a lot of median area here and a lot of opportunity to do some low-cost plantings. I should note that we've really recommended trees in pretty much every single one of the projects throughout, and it is contingent on really identifying the source of maintenance moving forward, but that's something that we plan to work out with our designers in that phase of design. And then ultimately, we've added in the appendix some alternative planting areas. And so when you get into the appendix of the plan, you'll actually see that we've suggested planting areas based on ACOG's environmental risk map based on where there's not a current tree coverage. And that is all that we have now, and
Daniel,
we'll take your
thank you.
questions.
Paul, anything else? Okay. Any questions for Daniel or Paul about this plan?
Yes. Can we go back to those 3 bridges?
Yeah. Let's see.
I know we mentioned that we will be working on kind of doing additions to beautifying them, not really touching the structure. Can you allude to what would it cost to build a whole new bridge? Because these are kind of terrifying. Even then the fencing all around them, even though we add art, it's still kind of scary to go through.
I am not qualified to make an estimate on that.
Okay.
I don't think he legally.
For a
that's
span
fine.
that
I can-
large,
I can tell you that it'd be several million
Yeah.
dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're just doing the best we can with the budget that we have, right?
Right, this is
Yeah.
beautification, not reconstruction, not replacement kind of things.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we do think that a lot of it will also look at the kind of entry points there. So softening it and just trying to make it more welcoming, and obviously working within the confines of not being able to rebuild a better bridge.
Just the fencing around it is just
Yeah.
very
Yeah,
intimidating.
yeah, I think you'd agree that even just a new paint color, something exciting. Maybe some lights or something on it.
Yeah, some decorative light, I think could be really
And
helpful.
there's obviously, the coverage is intentional, and I think they have some desire to keep that just from the possible projectiles that could be, you know, vice versa, either from the bridge or from the street and just trying to protect people. But there's obviously a lot of different ways to increase the visual appeal of a protective cover. And I think that's what we're really aiming to do as well.
Thank you.
Monique?
Is anything going to be done on those bridges to make sure that they are ADA accessible? Because it seems like it's kind of broken up a little bit, a little rocky.
And I don't know, David, if you wanted to talk to, I think number 3 on here was the only one that had concerns.
Yeah, we'll look at all that, and this is just a master plan to set up a budget and identify. But once we actually start with the plans, we can look at what specific things we can do to make sure ADA is met.
Great questions. Anything else? Okay. A lot of work has gone into this, a lot of progress, very interesting. And look forward to the timeline with 2028.
Absolutely.
Not far away. So with that, we need to approve this master plan as with the revisions, presented with the revisions. So please cast your votes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Recommend approval, 2J, recommend approval of the final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for the Maps 4 Bike Plan Phase 1B, North Classen Boulevard between Northwest Grand and North Britton Road, and Northeast 16th Street between North Walnut Avenue and Bryant.
Josh Malwick from Consor Engineers is here to go through this project.
Hi, Josh.
Hello, good morning. Like David said, I'll go through this final plan presentation. To start, just a reminder, the Phase 1B projects are the first of the 4 crosstown connection projects to be constructed. The north project is Classen Boulevard between Grand and Britton, and then the east project is Northeast 16th between Walnut and Bryant Avenue. The overall project goals for these projects, we wanted to add bike facilities to the existing roadway, provide connections between the north and the east portions of Oklahoma City to the bike infrastructure that's already been installed around downtown, and really just focus on enhancing the cyclist safety. Highlights for the Classen Boulevard project were that we added 5-foot bike lanes with 5-foot buffers. We do have a Tier 1 facility, so it's a protected facility. We added almost 1,200 delineators to the project that'll run along the buffer throughout the entire limits. The repaired, we did have some repairs to some damaged pavement that we need to take into consideration. We want to make sure that the limits of the bike lane, that footprint has some good pavement, that put in the stripe down is on a good surface as well. And then we update the signal detection at Chesapeake Drive. We did have some adjustments to make from the original Bike Walk OKC. The plan on Classen was to carry it all the way through the roundabout, but we can't put a bike lane in a roundabout, so we did have to take that out. We do just stop it about 100 feet on either side. This was for northbound only, as the southbound has 2 lanes that do come through the roundabout. And then in that bottom picture, you can see the northbound and southbound bike lanes will terminate at Wilshire. We can't put that short of just a bike lane on Wilshire by itself, so we had to go ahead and terminate that. We will have plenty of signs out though. Here's where the route goes, so that everybody knows to turn right and left for the route to be able to continue, whether they're going northbound or southbound. Then moving to 16th Street, the highlights here were that we updated pavement markings and signs. There's already some older style markings that are on the pavement now, so we're going to replace those, and then we'll update all the signs. We'll actually do this, I didn't say this on the other one, we'll do this on both projects, make sure all of the signage is updated on Classen as well. We added a bike lane between Lottie Avenue and Martin Luther King. That was upgraded from a Tier 2, as it was shown in Bike Walk, to a Tier 1. We were able to add almost 300 delineators along with that project, and then we updated the signal detection at Lottie Avenue. Some adjustments that we did have to make, the original bike walk did have, you can see that top picture and those, that pink cloud. It did have limits that were supposed to be a tier 2, but we were unable to do that because the roadway is too narrow. So we ended up having to revise that down to a tier 3 and make it a shared lane. But then once you get to Lottie, that's where we added the tier 1 facility, and that extends over to Martin Luther King. We extended the overall project from Katy Trail out to Bryan Avenue, adding about a half a mile of additional shared lane. There's a shared lane right now that runs along Bryant, so it ties into that. And then you can see in that bottom picture, the Lindsay Avenue center median there, we are gonna add 8-foot sidewalks that'll go through there that'll be pedestrian and cyclist accessible. We also added an add alternate to the plans for resurfacing Northeast 16th along between Lottie and Martin Luther King. If we were to go in and remove all the striping from the center turn lane there for the arrows and all that yellow stripe, it would leave a significant amount of scarring on the pavement, and then we'd end up coming in and restriping it. It gets a little dangerous at night whenever it's raining because you can't really tell what's stripe and what's the scar. So to eliminate that, we'd like to, hopefully we can get good bids on this add alternate to be able to resurface within those limits. The project schedule, yesterday we got the approval from the subcommittee. We'll hopefully get your approval today, then the council on Tuesday. And then hopefully right after that, we'll jump into bidding the project with an award sometime in October, also beginning construction and looking to complete construction in spring of next year. As far as it goes with budget and construction costs, there was $3.5 million in the budget. The Classen Boulevard project was about $1.5 million. The Northeast 16th Street base bid was at $564,000. The add alternate we're assuming is going to be around $550,000. But the base bid and the add alternate together, I know the math doesn't add up there. There are a few pay items that are duplicate pay items. So if the add alternate is selected, we remove those quantities out of the base bid, and then what is in the add alternate is actually what goes into it. And it's just a difference in striping material. The combined estimates for the base bids was at $2 million, and then the base bid plus the add alternate is $2.4 million, and we did have a surplus of $1.1 million left over in the budget. The public information website's been successful. As of yesterday, we had 500 hits on the site with almost 200 downloads of the fact sheets. These are the fact sheets that are on there. And we have been updating it along with the change in schedule. And I'd love to answer any questions.
Questions? So can you talk to us a little bit about the surplus budget piece and how that will that kind of go into another phase? How will that be utilized?
Yeah, we'll just roll that over into other projects. And I say other projects, other bike lane projects. It'll stay within the same genre.
Same bucket,
Yeah.
right, just a different phase. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Not, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Josh. If not, we need to approve this as recommended. I'll take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2K, recommend approval of transit plan growth BRT alternatives analysis. This is the growth plan. Yeah.
So Jill Gibson from Kimley Horn is here to quickly go through this plan for you.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, good morning. It's great to be back with y'all today. So last time I was here was in June, and we discussed our recommended, essentially, project route. We call it the LPA, the locally preferred alternative. And then that went through City Council and was approved. And so today is simply letting you know how we've incorporated the approved project into the final report and our next steps. So we'll cover quickly the schedule, the adopted alternative, our final report, and then the overall project's next steps. So we're at the tail end of the project, just concluding and wrapping up after a significant amount of technical work and stakeholder engagement the last 2 years. And on the screen is the adopted alternative that we shared with y'all as a recommended alternative in June that City Council formally adopted. So in total, it's 17 miles end to end with 26 station pairs. And this project will serve roughly 47,000 residents and 50,000 jobs with our planning level estimate of 2,700 weekday riders. And so we've taken that adopted alternative and incorporated it into our final report that I'm going to step through with you all. That will be posted online after today. So the final report is very user-friendly and visually appealing, hopefully a story that's easy to understand and digest with the overview, and then walking through the different phases of the alternatives analysis of the discover, refine, select, and then implementation chapters with a healthy amount of technical appendices to support the overall conclusion and process over the last 2 years. So project overview covers the in-depth collaboration with the communities, the subcommittee, the CAB and council in terms of goals and objectives, and then the corridor-specific stakeholders that we worked with, and the overall describes the process that we went through. Next, in the Discover chapter, really identifying the 6 alternatives that came from community engagement and technical analysis that we did much further study to understand what we called the high potential alternatives to further analyze. Then chapter 3 is the refinement of those 6 alternatives, and then working through the evaluation framework to then overall provide a performance scorecard of each alternative, and then came up with the opportunities to serve both the Northeast and South communities with really came up with a finally locally preferred alternative based on the feedback that we heard from the 6 alternatives and the technical analysis. And really the next steps in terms of outlining the high quality station amenities and providing premium BRT service for both the Northeast and the South. And the last chapter reviews the overall locally preferred alternatives funding approach and implementation timeline and the various feedback and project considerations that we recommend to be incorporated as the project continues to advance through environmental and further engineering. So as I mentioned, it will be posted online after today, the maps4brt.com website and also the city's website. So in terms of next steps, we've concluded after today, we'll have concluded the alternatives analysis and the planning phase. And we are starting pre-project development activities, which I'll touch on in the next slide. But that work is to overall support really the preliminary engineering and environmental phase that would happen over the course of 2025. Then through 26 and 27, final design with construction starting somewhere in the early 2028 timeframe, with being ready for opening at the end of 29. And the last slide here is what just a description of what we're up to now, is that we are conducting what's called a STOPS model, which is what the Federal Transit Administration requires to explore additional federal funding for the project. So there is a significant amount of coordination that occurs with the Federal Transit Administration and technical work to support overall what we call a draft ratings package, which then really is the project development entry application and then ongoing coordination with FTA. And this work, again, is to support and explore the opportunities to get to apply for federal funding for the project. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Jill? Joy, did you? No, okay. Anything? Okay, not. Thank you so much for being here today. If not, we need to approve this as recommended. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. So moving on to item 2L, recommend approval of resolution directing $8,172,123 of MAPS4 Trails budget for trail connectivity from South Oklahoma City to Lake Stanley Draper and the Oklahoma River to extend the South May Avenue Trail.
I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of intro on this because it'll ruin the presentation. So Nate Clare is here from ADG to go through this.
Hi, Nate.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Play off David's reference earlier. I think we're at the portion of the agenda where it's equivalent to the 7th inning stretch. So I'm not going to lead us in sing-along, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about a proposed South May Avenue Trail. Just to recap, the resolution in sidewalks, bike lanes, and trails and streetlights back in 2019 specified to provide trail connectivity to Lake Stanley Draper and the Oklahoma River in South Oklahoma City with emphasis on South Oklahoma City, in turn connecting to the trail system citywide. What is also important to remember is at that time, the city did not yet have any funded trail projects that connected the river and Lake Stanley Draper to the larger system. So the other thing I wanted to point out is that as we worked our way through the implementation of that plan at that time, that south connection and to Lake Stanley Draper, 104th Street was a major corridor, a significant corridor, and we looked at that in detail. It's approximately 11 miles long. What's important to understand here is that 3 miles of it is through the city of Moore. And when we looked at working this into the implementation plan, between that and the fact that kind of the eastern four miles of that is it's rural in character. The paving, 104th is narrow. There's bar ditches, and so it was going to become a very complex and expensive project. And so we kind of set that aside and focused on some other options. So I just wanted to provide a little background on that. So in the time that the resolution was written, there have been a couple of projects that meet the intent of the resolution that have been funded, and that's the South May Trail from Grand Boulevard to Southwest 59th, and that directly relates to the project I'm going to go in detail here in a minute, so I'll tell you more about that. But then there's Lake Stanley Draper connection, which when you look at these on the map, this is Lake Stanley Draper over here by Tinker, and then this is that South May Trail. So another item that has occurred since the resolution is that Bike Walk OKC was updated. Those are recent updates from earlier this year, and really kind of looked at priorities, reworking priorities. Some have moved up, some have fallen down, but this is a prioritized list of proposed trail facilities throughout the city. And so that was something that was taken into account as we looked at this. So this is specific. This is that connection to Lake Draper. What the city did was, between planning, public works, and maps, they coordinated and partnered together to create this connection. And it was done in 3 segments. So the Eastern Trail from Southeast 59th to Grand Boulevard, and that was funded by ACOG and some TAP funds, along with some additional ARPA funds. Then through the Better Streets, Safer City initiative, the east-west section was funded. And then lastly, the last section to connect to Draper, that was funded through MAPS 3 funds. So between all of those entities, that project is in design right now and under construction and will be finished soon. So going back to their priorities, what we tried to focus on when looking at what made sense for the next connection was kind of those top 5, 6, 7 priorities. You see priority 1 there is Legacy Trail. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but that's near Booker T. Washington Park. It's through the BNSF Railway Corridor and then comes down into Bricktown. So planning and public works are already discussing that, looking at funding issues, so that planning is already in the works. As is the Brock and Twin Creek trails. Kind of starts near Wheeler and proceeds south along Lightning Creek. There's a lot of private development along that, but that is also in talks for funding and being planned and coordinated. So the South May Avenue Trail, which you see there as item number 3, really hadn't been looked at, hadn't been discussed, or funding identified for that. So that's where we really started to look at for looking at an extension. The other thing to mention is that you see on this map the project MP 0608. That's a public works project. That is in design right now to basically start. It's a trail that starts at Woodson Park and goes south along May Avenue. So that is already in design and will go to construction later this year. We thought there was a lot of value for the community to possibly extend that. So again, I mentioned priority 1 and 2 are already kind of being planned and coordinated. So that priority 3 is optimum for more research and discussion. So this is where we get into some detail on that existing project that's in design. It is funded for $3 million. The benefits of this is that it provides through the trails connection at Woodson Park and along I-44 up to the river. It provides a connection to the Oklahoma River. It also, with the new library that was constructed, the Almonte Library at Southwest 59th, provides great access to that. You've got OCCC down there at Southwest 74th Street that it can provide access to. And there's also 6 elementary schools on either side of the corridor that are within a mile. So this is really an important corridor, and to be able to extend that to the south would be great for the community. So the MAPS 4 South May Trail extension that we would be proposing would pick up where that MP 0608 project leaves off. What's also important to know is you see the double purple line on there, that is the proposed BRT route. So this would provide access to that. And eventually, the south portion would connect to Earlywine and Earlywine Park and the YMCA at that point. What I do want to mention and make sure everyone's clear on is that north portion, that existing project, is currently in design right now. They've identified a base bid that basically ends at Southwest 59th Street. That orange section that you see there, that orange dashed line, has been identified as alternates. So we don't know if we're going to get that in the project yet. So the MAPS 4 portion might include the 3-mile stretch south of 74th, and it could include a mile to the north. But we won't know until later this year when that project bids. So, and I think one of the last slides is to show some additional benefits, going back to that overall Bike Walk OKC plan of the potential future connections in South Oklahoma City. You see roughly 4 other additional trails that are planned in that area that would connect into this portion that we were just discussing. So what's before you today is a request to send forth an approval of the resolution directing $8,172,123 to City Council for the trails budget to extend the South May Avenue Trail. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hey, any questions for Nate? I love connecting all the trails that we've got. So we need a motion and a second to approve this. Thank you. Please cast your votes. The motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2M, recommend approval of change order number 12 for the MAPS 4 Fairgrounds Coliseum, an increase of $89,938.
This one does not have a presentation. This is a change order. Routine items at the Coliseum. I can tell you that the Coliseum is going great, but things come up, and then also some things are requested by the operator, and you have several of those on here. Access control additions for 5 doors. There's a ceiling change, so we have a credit on paint. Overhead data conduit. It was configured in a vertical manner, and because of once the operators saw that and knew how much clearance they needed to get equipment through this corridor, it needed to be changed. I won't go through each of these, but you can see that there's additional power needed for an espresso machine and 2 ice cream machines. So it's just things like that come up. And this comes with the approval from the subcommittee.
Yes. The detail was included in our packets. Any questions for David on this change order? Not, I'd take a motion in a second to approve. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item 2N, recommend approval of final plans and specifications to be advertised for bid for the MAPS 4 Innovation District Connectivity Master Plan Phase 1.
So another set of final plans. There is a short presentation that Luke Schmidt from Kimley Horn has here just to show you the limits of this project.
Great,
Hi,
thank
Luke.
you. My name is Luke Schmidt. I'm the project manager for the Kimley Horn team. Excited today to talk to you about the Innovation District Work to Neighborhood Connectivity Project. This is the first phase of multiple phases. See, I already have my wrong clicks, Carrie. Thank you. So, want to give a little background real quick. The master plan for this project was approved in 2023, which really set the framework for this infrastructure project as well as the next phase of the project as well. So with the master plan, we identified a priority A and a priority B. We're currently wrapping up the plan, or the plans are done, and we're getting ready to advertise priority A. Approximately $5.1 million in infrastructure focused on a few corridors within the Innovation District, along Northeast 8th Street, along Lincoln, and along Lottie. With this project, there's 3 types of improvements that we're going to be focused on. 1, sidewalk improvements and enhancements, bicycle facilities 2, and then intersection improvements. So I wanted to talk briefly about those so you can know what to expect. So first and foremost, with the ADA sidewalk and design improvements, we're looking at opportunities to either close gaps and also fix the ADA compliant sidewalks along the corridors today. So you can see some pictures of the great sidewalks that are out there today that will be improved with this project. With this project, we're addressing 23 intersections with curb ramp improvements, as well as over 3.5 miles of sidewalks. So a lot of infrastructure will be constructed. Here's an example of what that looks like at an intersection itself along the Lottie corridor. We're looking at curb ramp improvements to address all the constraints along the corridor itself. Another opportunity with this project that's going to be constructed is bicycle facilities. Looking at Bike Walk OKC Northeast 8th Street has a Tier 1 facility that's been designed as part of this project. So from 235 to Lottie will be a on-street bike lane that'll look at connecting the Lottie bike lanes to the convergence development, which is really exciting. And with this project, we'll be taking the 2 outside lanes to develop the bike facilities along Northeast 8th Street. So here's an excerpt of the plans as well as a cross-section so you can see what that will look like. It'll be a 7-foot bike lane with 3-foot buffers with delineators. The other piece of this project is intersection upgrades as well. 2 things that we're going to be doing is both radar detection upgrades, so then the traffic signals can detect bicycles along the corridor and better detect vehicles, as well as pedestrian signal upgrades, so there'll be push buttons and pedestrian countdown heads at the signalized intersections within the project corridor. All of this to be an ADA compliant project. Here's an example at Lincoln and Northeast 10th Street as part of this project. You can see the enhanced crosswalk markings, you can see the curb ramp improvements, as well as the traffic signal and ADA improvements at the intersection itself to provide ADA compliant crossing across Lincoln. Another exciting thing about this project as well is the enhancements from a landscaping standpoint. A couple things that are going to be added with this project is street trees as well as amenity zones, and then enhanced streetscape elements specifically in front of the convergence development. Almost 180 trees will be planted as part of this project, 35 benches, and 20 amenity zones. These amenity zones include a few different things. One thing is each amenity zone will include benches, it'll include hardscape elements, and just a place for shade to be able to stop along the sidewalk corridor. The last but not least, with this project, there's limited right-of-way along the majority of the corridors, so we do have some acquisition that's already taken place to either provide temporary construction easements or permanent right-of-way to solve some of the corner clip issues along the corridors. Last but not least, the project budget was about $5.1 million that the master plan outlined. The current construction cost estimate is just under that at $5,040,000. And with your approval and city council approval, this project will be advertised very soon. We're anticipating advertising the project in September, October, with a bid award not far after, and then beginning construction end of this year, wrapping up early next year.
Okay. Any questions for Luke? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excited to get this one moving forward too. So with that, we need a motion and a second to approve as presented. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. All right, we've made it.
No, one more.
No, I know, we've got one
yeah.
more. We made it to the last presentation. Okay. Item 2O, recommend approval of master plan MAPS 4 park programming for neighborhood and community parks master plan development.
So you've seen some preliminaries of this. Darren Scott from Kimberly Horn is here with the final master plan. It's 450-something pages. Yes. And he's going to give you a brief overview of how he came to that and one example or two examples. So I'll turn it over to Darren.
Okay, Darren, welcome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging in there. Excited to share what we've been working on for the past, well, probably a year and a half to 2 years. So the purpose of the project, this was out of the resolution. Essentially, we were to assess, prioritize the current and future opportunities for each neighborhood and community park. So there's 105 that are classified as that. We looked at it through the lens of what conditions is it in, how accessible, the community input, and then what was missing or what could be expanded in those parks. And that bottom little line there talks about the resolution and what was required. So a quick overview where we've been and where we're at today. So there was 4 phases that we identified. First was the assessment of all the parks, then we moved into the recommendations, and the last bit of this was been developing the master plan that has all the information in it. As far as going back to the resolution, one of the main components that we looked at was community input, a really robust approach to that through an interactive website where people could post comments on a map in their park. We had concrete stickers out at each park where you could scan and take the survey right there and look around while you're at the park. Had over 16 community open houses across the city. We went to numerous pop-up events, all sorts of festivals, anything you can think of there, and then stakeholder meetings with the chambers, neighborhood associations, that kind of thing. So a really broad spectrum of public engagement went into this and received a lot of good input across the park system. So going into how we scored the park, we had 105 parks that were in various conditions, from some with not really anything in it to others that were recently upgraded. So we broke it down into 2 components. One would be the completeness of the park, and the other would be park condition. So those were our 2 lenses that we looked at on each park. On this slide here, this is an excerpt out of the 2020 Parks Master Plan. So it identified all of the park elements that should be in a neighborhood park and then what should be in a community park. So those were the 2 levels of parks that we had. So neighborhood parks would contain things like playgrounds, walking trails, park shelters, that kind of thing. So it's your smallest park within the system. And then community parks were a little bit larger. So that would serve 3 or 4 of the neighborhoods. And there was the neighborhood amenities plus a few more, such as splash pads, other facilities that they would be more appropriate in a little larger park. So with the completeness element of the project, we looked at all of those park elements that were identified in the 2020 plan, and we assigned percentages to it. So the chart on the left is the neighborhood park amenities. So we said of a neighborhood park, 20% of it would be play structures. Walking trails would be another 20%. So when we looked at each park, we identified, does it have those elements, and does it count for that percentage? We did the same thing with community parks. It had a few more categories, so the percentages were a little different, but those were the elements that we looked at. So here's an example of a park when you evaluate the completeness. So this one had a playground. It received the 20%. It had half of the walking trails that would be appropriate. It may have had walking trails to the playground, but not a loop within the park. So that received half credit. So when you look at all the elements, you add them up, this one was 80% complete. And we're only looking at the existing elements and are they there or not. We weren't looking at condition at this point on this side of the equation. So this park was 80% complete. On the other side of it, when we looked at park condition, we graded each element in the park on an A to F scale. So we went out to all 105 and graded the playgrounds, the walking trails, everything on an A to F scale, traditional school scoring system. Here's an example of a park where you can see a C grade is the basketball courts there in the middle. It's in average condition, but functioning but not new. There was the swing set, which was in good condition, had good surfacing, and the equipment was in good condition, so that would be an A. And then the sidewalks were failing, so that's an F score. So that's, as we went through that, that's how we looked at things. So here it gets into a little bit of numbers, just to show you how we went about the equation. So each of the elements on the park condition fall into one of those categories on the left there. So A to J is the different categories. Using the same weight that we had on completeness, we applied that on the condition. So if a playground was scoring a D, that received 20% of that park weight on the condition versus the other elements. The middle chart there is just our A to F scoring, putting that into number format. And then the example on the right, so each of the elements fall into one of those categories, but you may have multiple amenities in the park that are in a category. So site furnishings makes up benches, picnic tables, that kind of thing. So you can see over here we have the amenity and we have the category. So it all falls into that one of those categories. They're all scored differently. That then on this chart here roll up into the big category score. So looking at category G here, it has all the site furnishings, the quantities, you multiply that out, and then you get an average grade for those amenities here. So all of the categories were included. If it didn't have that amenity, it wasn't counted. So category D, there was no fitness facilities on this park, so it didn't have a score for that because that was factored in on the completeness side. So the last chart here is the taking all of those amenities or categories with the amenities in it and then applying that weight that I talked about to get you to this composite score of a park. So this example park scored a D minus or 61%. So that's how we looked at the park as a whole and what kind of condition it was in. And then the last step we took was taking the condition grade, which was the D minus or 61%, multiplied it by the completeness, and then put it on a scale of 1 to 10. So we multiplied it by 10, and it came out to the 4.9 is what we called the existing park quality index. So that was the number that we looked at across the board, park to park. With that, whenever we looked at our recommendations, we looked at replacing the things that needed to be improved. Either they were in poor condition or they were missing. When you rerun the numbers with the new amenities, then you get this new park score. So it was, with the new amenities, it moved it to a 7.4. And then with that, we identified this park target zone, which was the target zone. We were trying to get all the parks into that zone. So here is a comparison, and what we did is we compared neighborhood parks together and we compared community parks together, just so it's, they're comparing apples to apples. So this top charts up here, those show the existing condition scores. So the orange line is what you would look at. So they're all over the place. Some are high, some are low. The bottom charts are the recommended scoring. So you can see we moved the parks up into that range. So the 6.5 to 7.5 number is the target zone. All these parks were able to get within that range. Not all the parks were able to fall in there. There were some that fell outside of it due to size, or some of them may have started high, had recent improvements before this project. So on this slide here, we'll quickly go through an example. So every park has 4 pages associated with it as far as the improvements are concerned. So here's William O. Lytle Park. It's a neighborhood park, and it shows all the recommendations that are recommended in this report. It's a lot of it replacing things. These were not in great condition, the elements, but then we also added a sidewalk loop because it didn't have that complete sidewalk. The element of community input is included on each of the park pages. This one had comments about adding security lighting, upgrading the swing set, that kind of thing. So when we looked at what needed to be improved, we also looked at the community input to see if that was matching what we were seeing. So we looked at that. And then this is the other portion where it shows the table of all the park scoring we had. It shows the existing condition chart, has the existing score, and then it shows the new score over there on the right and the recommendations. And then the last page to each of these are the estimates. So here's the detailed estimate for this park of what it would receive. We also included alternates in this to, in case the budgets, the bids come in, we'll have some things to add in for additional amenities. The other one, and this is basically is the same thing, but looking at the community parks. So here on the community parks, there's not quite as wide a range of scoring. They're comparable, but there's still gaps there. So looking down at the bottom, we were able to even those up. And the park, or the target range on that was 5.5 to 6.5. So it's a little bit lower, but there's more amenities in those parks. So Taylor Park, this is an example of a community park. Again, same format with the recommended improvements. We had public comments on this as well. The same page with moving the score from a 2.6, so scoring really low, up to the 6.3. The one thing I'll note on this estimate, there were some bond funds from 2017 bond projects that Parks Department said, hey, let's put those into this budget too to help it go a little further. So Taylor Park was one of those parks that had the bond funding. So it shows 750,000 of improvements, but in reality, it's about $1.5 million with the 750 from the bond money included. So that really did help extend some of the improvements through this project. And then again, last one, this is a little bit different park. Woodland Park, really wooded area. Wanted to highlight this as one of the inputs from the community was adding a connection across the creek there. So again, every park is a little bit different on the improvements and really did look at that community input as to what would be desired. So again, another estimate on this one as well. So on the overall budget, we had $66 million to allocate across these parks. About $51 million was what we call the general pot that could go across all 105, and then we had dedicated funds for a few of the parks that you'll see there. So Booker T. Washington, Menace Lake, Northeast, and Lake Stanley Draper. So those were dedicated funds. And then down here is the list of the bond funds that are included. So total is a little over $66 million allocated. The last step that we did after we made all the recommendations was to break these up into phases. So there's 5 phases. Basically, each phase is about one phase a year, and then 2 bid packages in each of those phases. So you'll see these broken out here. 1C is Washington Park, so that's its own phase, and then 2C is Draper, and that's its own package, not phase. And then we'll quickly look at the phases. So here's a few maps. When we looked at how do we want to group these together, we looked at what are the parks that are scoring the lowest, that are geographically located together, so we're not having the contractor go edge to edge on the city. So First phase is mainly down in the lower southern part of town. This is 1A, so this one would go first in 2025. 1B, so the bond money had to be spent early because it was 2017, so it is going, those projects are going into 1B to get those funds spent. So you'll see this number is a little higher on 1B, but that's because of the bond money. These are a little more scattered because the bond parks were kind of all over the city, so they scattered a little bit. 1C I mentioned was Booker T. Washington, and then you'll see as we'll quickly click through these, we moved to the west, then back down to the south, again, kind of packaging these up together. This is C, 2C, which is Draper, some more down here. Primarily the southern parks are the ones that need the most improvements first. And then we move up in 3B, up into Northwest, the far north and 4A, moving back over 4B on the east, 5A again on the east, and then the last one is really the core, and you'll see a lot of, this is a longer list of parks on 5B, and that's the last one. These didn't need as much improvement, so you'll see these estimates being lower, so that's why there's more parks in that phase, because of the newer improvements that those have had. Here's just a quick overview of how we're gonna go from 2025 to 2029 on the spending to spend that $66 million. Another component that was a separate piece to this was the basketball and pickleball improvements. It had a little over $500,000, and those are proposed to go in Woodson and Earlywine. So basketball would be Woodson and pickleball in Earlywine. And then the last slide here is just a few by the numbers. So out of 105 parks, 56 playground improvements, primarily those are new playgrounds. All the splash pads were replaced, so all 14 within this system, or the park, neighborhood community parks. And then we have solar lighting, shelters, that kind of thing. So a really nice package of improvements across a lot of parks. So with that, I will take any questions.
Questions? Daisy?
Yes, I've had several community members call me, message me, and we met in person, requesting soccer kind of improvements,
Yes.
added soccer areas to the parks.
Yes.
I didn't see any of them in the southern parks. Did I miss something, or are those not included, or?
So mainly typically neighborhood parks aren't large enough to really even have that much space for a soccer field. On the community parks, there's no for the most part, there's no formal fields. Mainly those are used for practice fields. So there are soccer goals that we've recommended improvements on, but there's not the formal play fields. Those are typically found in your larger parks. We did add in a few parks futsal, which is the miniature soccer on a court. So there are improvements for those in several of the parks too.
Okay, yeah, I did see the futsal for the South Rodeo Park, but okay, thank you.
Yeah, now a lot of it is just space consideration and then the type of park that's
Yeah, that park's pretty large, so
Yeah.
they're gonna probably ask for
Okay.
that soccer field. But then I'll relay the information of the futsal courts, so.
Okay, and these are recommendations as we go into it. If there's a large voice to add something a little different, I mean, we've got it allocated per park, but we can look at that too.
Thank you.
Monique,
Yeah, I was gonna say, we did some early on work at South Lakes on their soccer fields. And,
Yeah,
but
we
that
have
wasn't in,
separate.
that was separate, it wasn't in this report. I just wanted to bring that up, that we did do some work down south in South Lakes and up north
For Cameron.
for Cameron.
Yeah.
I guess the concerns from the community is that those soccer fields are usually already booked by larger teams, and so they're not really open for like community members who don't have the resources to be a part of those larger teams to use those fields. So usually those fields are booked and then they get kicked out because those fields are booked. And so they're asking for more soccer fields that they can play in where that they don't get kicked out for not having the resources to be a part of those teams.
Okay.
Okay, good to know. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. A lot of work has gone into this. Thank you so much and appreciate your presentation. Oh, yes, one more thing, sorry.
I just wanted to say, when we heard this presentation yesterday, Tuesday, whenever it was, that the comments from the committee was that they've done a really good job with getting community input, with really listening, and still being open to doing a few maybe possible changes if necessary. One of the big things that came up was additional lighting at all parks, you know, across the board, to make it a little better accessible and safe for evening time. But kudos to the team for putting together a great master plan. They've done a lot of work and they've been very diligent, and I think they've listened to all of the concerns that the community's had.
Okay, yes, I would agree. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Darren. Okay, so we need a motion and a second to approve the master plan. Please cast your votes. With our second? Do we have a second? There we go. Thank you, Todd. It's not working? You're on computer, right? Yeah?
Your screen's not working.
I vote yes. Even our technology is tired. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. So item 3, discussion items.
We don't have anything further.
Okay. Any subcommittee reports? Okay, update status on MAPS 4 program, Mr. Todd.
We briefly talked about Coliseum. It still is under construction, going great. Sidewalks are under construction and bus stops are under construction.
We are moving forward. You warned us. I did. Right? Okay. And I would just like to say, do we have any citizens that have signed up today? Okay. Any staff comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I would just like to say thank you so much for sticking with this. This has been a long meeting, a lot of information. Really appreciate it. Jessica?
I just want to say a big condolences to one of our subcommittee members, Louisa McCune, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. And she was just really instrumental in pushing that animal shelter forward and making sure that connections were being built with other partner agencies. And so she will be sorely missed on our subcommittee.
You are absolutely correct, not just on MAPS, but throughout our community. She led a full life and left a paw print. Okay. One other thing that I did want to mention to you, and I'll remind you before next month, we're kind of having a little bit of quorum issues with some of our subcommittees. So as Citizens Advisory Board, you are the chairs and co-chairs for those committees. So reminding your committee members, and we're happy to help you do that either electronically or just at the meetings. We really need we need folks to show up. Yesterday we had 4 subcommittee meetings and made quorum once. So we need to get our folks back engaged. Mr. Todd, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. And thank you for being here. Thank you.